Welcome, everyone, to our presentation on navigating business establishment in China. I'm excited to discuss how companies can navigate the complexities of this promising yet extremely challenging market. Today, we're going to explore the top concerns that arise during this process and the effective solutions that you can implement. We'll also highlight how Woodburn, with our local expertise and resources, can assist you in this journey. And as we delve into each concern, I do encourage interactive dialogue, so please jot down questions that arise for our Q&A later on. Before we start today's presentation, I just want to briefly introduce who we are. Woodburn Accountants and Advisors is one of China and Hong Kong's most trusted business setup and corporate administration advisory firms. Our expertise lies in helping foreign investors with their market entry and expansion within the Hong Kong and China territories. We help clients eliminate the complexities surrounding administrative processes in both these jurisdictions. And this is everything from trademark registrations, pre-investment advisory, incorporations, and all the ongoing administrative work and corporate compliance like accounting, tax, corporate governance, payroll, etc. All of our clients have different objectives, goals that they wish to accomplish in the Chinese market. They all have different time commitments, financial commitments as well. And so we tailor make each of our programs specific to our clients' needs. A little bit about myself. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I have been in this role for the last 22 years, focused purely on the Chinese market as well as the Hong Kong market. I've been helping over 850 companies in a variety of different industries and sectors with their market entry, pre-investment advisory into the Hong Kong and Chinese market, assisting them with creating business models that, again, suit their time requirements as well as their financial commitments. And then I help to implement those business models and ultimately guide them through the administrative processes that help them grow and scale. If you would like to connect with me on WeChat, here is my QR code. Otherwise, you can always email me at christina@woodburnglobal.com or check out our website at woodburnglobal.com. So let's get started to today's presentation. Now, the Chinese market is undeniably attractive, driven by rapid economic growth, technological advancements, and a burgeoning consumer base eager for new products as well as new services. Companies across sectors are looking to establish a foothold drawn by the vast market opportunities. However, it is obviously not without its challenges. The inherent complexities of the regulatory environment, the cultural differences, and the competitive landscape, they do present significant hurdles to companies that are looking to enter the market. And as we advance through the concerns today, again, I invite you to consider how these issues may apply to your specific business context. And if you do have any questions, then please do ask them during the Q&A. So concern number one is in relation to regulatory compliance. As you may know, China's business regulations are intricate and subject to changes, often without much notice. To give you an example, one of the biggest changes that occurred in 2024 was implemented on July 1st, 2024, which was a update to the company law. Now, why is this market so challenging? I'm going to use this example specifically. The implementation was July 1st, 2024, and what we have noticed in various cities throughout China and even districts within cities in China is that you will have variations to that company law where the district governments or the city governments have created their own implementation process, their own variety of application forms. Some have not even, we're now at the end of February, been updated. They're still using old application forms, making it very difficult for us to actually understand whether the new company law is truly applicable or not in some instances. So it's really a matter of navigating around the laws on foreign investment, understanding what the environmental regulations are, the labor laws. Currently, a big topic is cybersecurity requirements. Companies can face real risks if these regulations are breached or if you're not in compliance to dealing with them. And there can then be fines. Really, in the worst case scenarios, criminal penalties may arise. I mean, this is again something that we're reading in the Western media, are foreign execs being either held up in their offices or not allowed to leave the country for certain reasons. And generally it's due to not following these regulatory compliance issues. So the big question then comes down to, how do we resolve the issues around regulatory compliance? How do we mitigate these risks? So the first thing I will say is that you really do need to hire local legal experts who are well versed in the constant evolving regulatory framework. And obviously working with experts that have years of experience and understand the nuances of how the various government offices work. One of these providers is obviously Woodburn, but we have a lot of clients who prefer to do the incorporations with actual law firms and then move the administrative work over to the incorporation agents or the accountants and tax representatives. But it is really important to have somebody on the ground who has this expertise. Now, I have had in the last 22 years of doing this, a lot of clients who use local employees to do this research, to do this work on their behalf. If you've got the confidence and trust in having your local employee who is actually a merchandiser or a quality control expert or actually a marketing expert do this administrative work, by all means, let them do it. It's going to be a free of charge service, but they're going to be learning on the job and may not know all the nuances that is involved and may not be able to provide you all the necessary explanations, which are, again, a part of the foundation of what you need to know when you are establishing the entity in China. So again, it is a matter, I don't know, I always feel like it's better to invest more in building a solid foundation than eliminating those outsourced providers over time and then bringing things in-house versus doing things on the cheap side and having to spend actually a lot more money years down the road on having to fix things because you didn't take the time to do that research or to gain that knowledge level and understanding. Don't forget, these professionals are there to give you tailored advice specific to you, obtain the necessary licenses, draft the necessary contracts, and obviously create a structure and foundation that is adherent to the necessary tax obligations, but ultimately creating a tax optimized structure. Additionally, we always recommend, once a company is established, and if you're doing everything in-house, to then do regular compliance audits. These audits will help you spot potential regulatory issues before they escalate because maybe your in-house staff aren't aware of the new regulations, or allow for timely corrective actions, ultimately with the goal that your business operations remain within the legal framework. So really, the first concern is the regulatory compliance. It's getting that knowledge level of what is going to be specific to you for your industry sector that you are in order to create an entity that fits your needs. Thinking on the grand scheme of things about tax optimization, making sure you've got contracts in place for whatever needs to be done, whether that's with employees, with suppliers, etc., and doing this work in that pre-investment stage before you actually commit to the establishment in the market. The second concern is intellectual property protection. You might all be wondering why I'm putting this under business entity setup. I'm doing this because intellectual property protection is usually the least prioritized item for most small, medium-sized companies. It's something that is so easy to solve, but somehow nobody pays attention to it, and it's really at the bottom of everybody's task list. We obviously have risks of IP theft and infringement, whether that's trademarks, copyrights, patents, etc. You need to do an inspection within your company of what needs to be registered specific to you in the Chinese market. Are you also going to do things under the Madrid Protocol? Are you going to do just trademark registrations and no patents? Are you going to do patents and no trademarks? You've got to understand what brand assets you're going to be utilizing within the Chinese territory and make sure that you are protecting these innovations, that you are protecting your proprietary information, and that you are ahead of the game and beating out your competitors and making sure that these, again, foundation pieces are taken care of. As mentioned, foreign companies have the experience that IP infringements, they undervalue them, they underscore them, and they don't protect them in the end. And again, this can really prevent you from growing and scaling in the market. So to address these concerns effectively, you got to take proactive steps. And this is even before establishing your company in China, all right? You've got to register your trademarks, your patents, your copyrights. You've got to also crowdsource local knowledge to help navigate the registration process more smoothly. Implement strong contractual agreements with local partners in order to make sure that they are not registering things on your behalf. These contracts should detail everything from IP ownership to whether you're licensing your brand assets or not. And obviously, ultimately, if there is infringement, what potential violations or penalties will be imposed. So this is really a critical foundation, right? And again, it's part of the regulatory compliance. It's understanding in that area, what do you need to do from an IP perspective, and making sure that all of that is done prior to actually establishing your company. Concern number 3 is around cultural and language barriers, which are significant obstacles that can impede business operations and relationships in China. One of the things that I want to relate to when establishing a company in China and ultimately operating and maintaining a company in China is that the way you operate is going to be different than what you are doing in the Western world. So if you're planning on setting a subsidiary in China from your US company, your German company, your UK company, from wherever in the world, you have to realize that the way things are done are different. The tax bureaus operate differently, the banks operate differently, the Ministry of Commerce, where you file your application to set up the company, things are done differently. And a lot of times I have clients that compare, right? Well, you know, in the Netherlands, it's done like this. I would not know. My expertise for 22 years has been China. I pretty much only know China and Hong Kong and how things are done in these two jurisdictions. So for me, it's a standard operating procedure in terms of how banks work in the Chinese market or how tax bureaus work in the Chinese market. And so my communication style with them for the last 22 years has been a certain way. I honestly would not know how to communicate with a tax officer in the UK or anywhere else. Wouldn't even know where to start with that, right? So comparing is really something that's useless. You've got to be open to the idea that just simply things are done differently, and it's a matter of learning what are those pathways to then being successful, and not then negating things, right? So a lot of people start blaming, well, in Europe, we do things X, Y, and Z, so in China should be the same. It's not, okay? You're not now going to be the one person who's going to change the Chinese system in terms of how they do things. So it's clear that as a foreign investor, there are going to be misunderstandings that arise from the cultural differences in communication styles and negotiation practices and business etiquette, but ultimately, there are going to be misunderstandings in the standard operating procedures that exist in China, okay? And it's a matter, in order to avoid all of these potential conflicts, to realize that you need to just learn what the standard operating procedures are when you are setting up the company, when you are operating your bank account, when you are dealing with tax bureaus, how your accounting should be done. You know, it's a Fapiao-based accounting system. It's not necessarily an accrual-based accounting system like we know in the West. It's a matter of, again, understanding these nuances and making sure that you are building your Chinese company based off of those standard operating procedures. So it is really imperative that if you are looking to build effective relationships with all of that Chinese ecosystem and fostering a better business environment, you've got to be aware of these. I call them cultural differences because these standard operating procedures are just different compared to the West. So resolution, okay? Again, with every concern, I do want to offer resolutions and solutions to these problems. So again, to effectively bridge these cultural gaps, one of the first things you can do is outsource all of these functions, right? You can outsource your marketing activities to a marketing agency who knows how to market within the Chinese territory. You can outsource your accounting and your administrative functions to an outsourced party who knows how all of these things work. Generally speaking, I always say, try and outsource as much as you can within the first 12 months of operating your entity in order that you learn and you build on your knowledge level. And in that way, you are also building up a job description, if you will, and skill set that you need in order to be able to hire somebody in-house, hire that local talent that will take over from those outsourced parties, right? You need to hire that local expertise that can be on your side, so understand where you're coming from, but at the other side, right, is this bridge person, if you will, who is on your side on one side of the bridge, and on the other side is effectively doing the communication, implementing those standard operating procedures, and developing those interactions. Okay. Second to that is this cross-cultural training. Okay. For your local employees, as well as for yourself, if you're going to be based in China, or for any foreigners that are going to be based there developing your business. You need that cross-cultural training so that people develop a concept of how things work in the West, but at the same time, how things work in China, right? Is having that bridge. This training can equip both parties with the necessary skills to navigate these cultural nuances, help build a rapport in terms of explaining things versus constantly arguing, oh, I don't believe that it works like that in China. You're taking the mickey out of me. No way can this work in China. Well, the reality is there are very specific standard operating procedures in China when you are doing things. And it's a matter of really just implementing those and then tweaking and pivoting them based on your cultural aspect within your own company, right? In terms of how you manage people and how you operate and stuff. So ultimately, we want to have local talent. My belief is that you can't grow your business in China without having an on-the-ground presence of people who are full-time working for you and supporting you in order to build up your business. Definitely start off outsourcing initially, but then gain that knowledge level to understand who do you actually really need in your organization, who should that first person be, that second person be. You know, those first initial talents will be critical to developing the business, and then eventually provide that training, okay? A lot of people make the mistake of hiring individuals who've had experience working in foreign invested companies, and they make the assumption that they can hire them and from day one, they will be able to kick off and grow your organization. That's actually not the reality. Those individuals have received training in foreign invested companies that may not fit your ethos, your philosophy, or the way that you do business. So there's always going to be some form of training that needs to be provided to these local talents, okay? Training is fundamental and it is critical. It's something that a lot of people, when they're growing their business in China, just don't seem to have the time to do. And unfortunately, that's where then they realize that those first hires that they've made have to be fired because they are not willing to then adapt to how you want to do your business because you didn't develop those training techniques from day one. The second concern is really market dynamics. So I am in a situation right now with quite a few clients who are on the edge of their seats where they say we've hit certain triggers in the market where we are being pushed to set up our business and our entity in China. However, there is just general geopolitical tension. There's uncertainty in the economics of the world, not just China. And we are worried about making this financial commitment, this time commitment to establishing an entity. And it's like a back and forth discussion, right? They're really uncertain about what is happening. Now, most of my clients are consumer brands that are looking to sell into the Chinese market, which is why I've put here as the bullet point, uncertainty in consumer preferences and trends. You also have in the market more local brands that are peaking, but it doesn't mean that there isn't room for what you are looking to do, right? So obviously, this means companies are in an uncertain situation. They're finding it challenging to understand how much their business might grow over time. And they are stuck. They do not know what to do, right? And again, my solution is always about spending a little bit of money, unfortunately, but this is how you get the data, right? Conducting market research is, again, indispensable step to gaining insights into consumer behaviors and preferences. There are really interesting, I'm not a market research expert, but obviously my clients are doing this. So I'm learning about what is happening in the market research realm. There is really interesting new ways of obtaining data from consumers through local market research firms or consultants that I find fascinating. Many of them are pushing the idea of pilot programs and focus study groups, allowing businesses to basically test their offerings in real world settings in real time before actually doing a full scale launch. And this feedback loop is critical, we found, to making necessary adjustments to business structures or ultimately necessary adjustments to product, packaging, flavorings, etc., to align, obviously, in the end with the consumer demands. So this in real time to real individuals pilot programs are a way of understanding what is happening in the moment. And these market dynamics are critical to do every few months because things are changing all of the time. Just to give you an example from a medical perspective, just because this has been happening to us recently within the family, is if somebody has a heart attack, their blood test from 1 month ago is absolutely useless to look at. You need to do a blood test straight away after that's happened to see what is happening in real time. If you relate this to market dynamics, a market research study that you did 1 month ago is going to be irrelevant 1 month later because of the change in the market dynamics within China. So you've got to make sure you're keeping yourself up to date consistently and building up that moment with that data in order to understand how you're going to pivot. And again, in order to be able to do all of this, it's really a matter of having that on the ground presence and listening to either your in-house employees or to your outsourced providers who are doing this work for you to help you understand what's going on in the market. The fifth concern is around time commitment. Okay, so the time commitment required to establish a business entity in China can be considerable. And again, this is where a lot of frustrations come into play, because by the time a company says, okay, we've made the decision, we want to go, but we need the license in a week, that's never going to happen. All right, that's just very simply never going to happen. Navigating the various legal processes, going through the various key decisions that have to be made into the foundation of that company, then obtaining the necessary approvals and integrating oneself into the market, it can stretch over several months until finally you have the opportunity to open the bank account, which currently nobody can guarantee the length of time that's going to take, but it is a minimum of 30 working days just to open that bank account, okay? So many foreign individuals, companies, they underestimate this timeline, which obviously leads to frustration or worse, a rushed and poorly planned entry. Again, my key thing is about building a sound foundation from day one, and then obviously rushing thereafter. It's really, really crucial to recognize that taking the time to ensure thorough preparation can ultimately pay off to achieve the long-term success that anybody is looking for. And when I say success, I also mean budget-wise. We don't want to spend more than is absolutely necessary. So as long as you've made that preparation at the beginning, you are then limiting the amount of things you're going to have to pay if you hit obstacles or roadblocks and then have to change your structures. So for me, the key thing is talking to a local expert to understand what is the action plan when establishing an entity, when are the key milestones that are required, developing a timeline through that expertise, preparing key deadlines so that everybody who is responsible knows what their role is and when they're going to be needed within this action plan. Keep in mind that the action plan, although detailed, is going to be a tentative timeline. There are a lot of things that the local experts can't guarantee on when dealing with different government offices. It also depends on timing of the year. We just finished Chinese New Year. We've had 4 different applications in delay because the government offices were shut down, people weren't coming back on holiday on time, etc. So you've got to look at this timeline as a tentative timeline, but going as detailed as possible and then pivoting that timeline as you move along. It's got to be a flexible timeline. Obviously, engaging with local consultants, experts can substantially streamline this process and give you then insight into what is happening. And obviously, I would love to say that most consultants and individuals have established networks within the government offices in order to speed things up. But I can tell you now that with the new company law and with how things work in terms of KYC processes, which are due diligence processes at the banks, it does not matter who you know within these organizations. You can know the top guy. They all must follow their internal due diligence processes. And again, there is an estimated timeline. There is never a specific timeline. But the key is making sure that you add all of the different components into your timeline so that ultimately you then know when money is going to be taken out in order to pay for certain things, but also when you can start operating and executing on your supply chain. One of the biggest issues that we had with a client, this was quite a while ago, was that the minute the business license was issued, they sent a shipment making the assumption that the remaining steps would only take 6 weeks. And unfortunately, the tax bureau took much longer than anticipated, which meant that when that shipment arrived, cleared customs, they were still not general VAT taxpayers. And it meant that their input VAT that they paid on that incoming shipment was a absolute cost. They were unable to deduct it from the sales they were going to do on that shipment. And that was all a timing component. The 6th concern is around financial commitment. Now, this is a significant concern because, again, a lot of people still make the assumption that China is cheap and that things are not getting increasingly more expensive, which is not the reality of the situation. So when you are going into the Chinese market and when you are setting up your own organization, your own entity, you do have to look at the initial investment. You do have to keep into account all the various ongoing operational costs when it comes to lease agreements, staffing, import tariffs, like I just mentioned, legal fees, buying supplies, marketing costs, PR-related costs, warehousing fees, etc. All of these things can add up extremely quickly and again may vary depending on the regional market conditions, right? We all know that Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou tend to be more expensive than places like Nanjing, Wuhan, Wuxi, Ningbo, etc. So it's understanding what these costs are going to do, or these costs are going to, how they're going to impact you. And then obviously understanding these financial dynamics is crucial for the long-term sustainability of the company, right? improper budgeting can lead to really serious financial strain within the organization. We've had this with several clients who did not calculate accordingly the investment capital needed for their Chinese entity. And they went I believe it was 3 or 4 months without being able to pay salaries. All right, so did people resign? Yes, they did. So they lost critical employees that they would have loved to have kept. During COVID, when there were the Shanghai, I call them the Shanghai lockdowns, and there was a lot of people had no oversight over their own bank accounts. They weren't sure what their bank balances were. Those that survived that 8-week, 9-week period were those that had enough had enough cash sitting in their bank accounts, because there was no incoming payments coming in. I mean, nobody was at the banks, right? And nobody who was working at the banks could take their laptops home and work from home, accessing the various bank details. And if you know how to operate a bank account in China, you need to provide supporting documentation before money can be injected, etc. So really, most people were surviving off of what was their existing cash flow. And it became a serious financial strain for many people who couldn't pay rent, who couldn't pay salaries, because money was just being held up in escrow accounts because no supporting documentation could be submitted. We need to avoid all of these scenarios. Now, God forbid that there's going to be another COVID episode, but we always need to have enough cash sitting in our bank accounts that we can pay off our expenses and keep the entity running. Remember, when you're establishing your company in China, this is a startup phase. Startup phase are always going to be tricky. There's going to be ebbs and flows, and you need to take into consideration that you have enough cash on the ground to support that business. I always say you need people on the ground and you need cash on the ground to be able to kick things off smoothly and to not run into any real hurdles and obstacles along the way. So, solutions. Well, the first thing is conducting a comprehensive financial analysis before making any commitment is really essential. Having local expertise verify these analyses is also critical, because you need that expertise to say, oh, you've forgotten to add this budget line item, you've forgotten to do this, you've forgotten to do that. You need that expertise to do that review, to make sure that you are considering all of the potential costs and you are really looking at the timing and evaluation of all of the prospective revenue streams that might be coming in. One of the things that has always shocked many of my clients is the delay in payments received from customers. Although you have the expectation that people will pay immediately or within 30, 60 days, depending on the payment terms you've set, there will always be delays. So creating a detailed budget that includes contingencies for any unexpected expenses will obviously help mitigate these financial risks. If one of the questions you're going to ask me is, Christina, what should we allocate in terms of those unexpected expenses? There is no magic number. This really does need to be tailor-made to you, all right? You may also want to explore various financing options, for example, with local partners or with collaborations, or seeking investment from local investors, if that's something that you want to do in terms of having joint venture partners. Again, this can all provide strategic capital, but as well as other benefits in terms of, other channels that they may be offering to open up for you. The next one is, again, concern number 7 is the operational challenges, all right, in terms of supply chain issues and challenges in labor recruitment. Establishing reliable supply chain, managing logistics, recruiting skilled labor really can lead to inefficiencies in China. You should probably have the estimation that the first 1 or 2 employees that you're going to hire will be fired within the first 12 to 14 months, just because your knowledge level will increase and you will realize what type of skill set that you need. And generally, the first couple of people you hire won't have that skill set. So have that expectation that you will have employee turnover initially. Have that expectation that you might need to change logistical providers, warehousing individuals, etc. just because you have been given a lot of promises that many companies then don't keep. Now, the biggest thing in China is all about developing a network, and it's all about developing guanxi. Oops, sorry, let me go back. It's about developing guanxi. It's about developing your network, and knowing people is going to ultimately help you to build your business. So you do need to prioritize developing local partnerships with suppliers, logistics firms, having backups for suppliers, for logistics firms. You may have to switch out. You may not want to put all your eggs in one basket. But ultimately, when you do find the right suppliers, the right logistics providers, the right marketing firms, whomever that are part of your partnership, you want people that you can rely on. You want people that are going to help you reduce cost and create win-win situations for both parties. And ultimately, you do want to enhance your supply chain efficiency, right? Currently, with all the geopolitical tensions and the tariffs that are being imposed between China and the US, et cetera, it is really important to reevaluate your supply chains consistently, and understand how you can improve them, how you can reduce costs, and how you can maintain efficiency and reliability along that route. Investing in technology, again, can streamline operations. This is probably not something that you want to invest in from day one of establishing your own business, but it is something that you need to start researching on day one of your business. Because although you might be utilizing another provider who has that technology to streamline, you need to learn what is the best for you, that when you do invest in it, you're buying and investing in the right one, okay? And ultimately, you need to consistently train your local employees on best practices, how to optimize productivity. If you are sourcing in China and you have a team of quality control experts, do not make the assumption that somebody you hire that has 15 years of experience in the product category that you want can work from day one. You're going to have to train them. You're going to have to understand where are their weaknesses, where are their strengths, and be with them physically to see how they're doing that work and train them on the job, on how to improve, on how to optimize, etc. Okay? By ultimately fostering a capable local workforce, and efficient operational strategies, you will ultimately then achieve better results and develop a stronger market presence. But again, you might not want to do this all from day one. It's a matter of then building this over time. So ultimately, in conclusion, while establishing a company in China presents numerous challenges, whether it's regulatory compliance, whether it's time commitment, financial investments, operational issues, the cultural nuances in terms of these standard operating procedures that have to be implemented, etc. You're going to have to recognize and proactively address these concerns in order to be successful along the way. And that's a lot of planning that has to happen, okay? It's a lot of strategic planning that has to happen along the way. So ultimately, what I would recommend to anybody is build your ecosystem within the Chinese market. Understand what parties do you need in order to achieve success, whether that's a law firm, an accounting firm, a marketing firm, a logistics firm, then your network of suppliers, maybe then also your network of customers. Getting all of that work done is the foundation of being successful. How Woodburn can help you. Obviously, if you are looking to establish an entity in China, we would be more than happy to assist you. We are incorporation agents, so we can do the incorporations directly with the Ministries of Commerce. We can help prepare all of the documentation that is required. If you are looking to set up a joint venture, the one thing that we don't do is the joint venture agreement or the shareholders agreement. This is something that we would highly recommend you to utilize a lawyer for. But then the remaining incorporation requirements are something that we do on a day-to-day basis. We can also help with ongoing administrative processes, whether that is accounting, tax, payroll, corporate governance, which entails the standard operating procedures. We can help you with all of that. If you are planning on seconding foreigners into China. We can help with the visa applications, trademark registrations, etc. If you'd like to learn more about what we can do for you, you can head on over to our website, which is woodburnglobal.com. To finish off, I always like this quote to finish off on in terms of the presentations. Remember that entering and operating in China can be a rewarding journey with the right preparation and strategies. You know, my philosophy is don't rush, be prepared, make sure you've done your budget, make sure you've done your business plan, and you know what your action plan looks like. So as we were marketing our webinar, we had quite a few people who couldn't come live. So I will be going through some questions that were raised for those that couldn't come live. For those of you that are watching live, if you do have any questions, just insert them into the chat box. I will get to them. So we've got 4 questions that have popped up. One of them is, how long does it typically take to establish a business entity in China? So the timeline really does depend on the type of business. It does depend on the location. For example, in Shanghai right now, you can do the online registration, and within 5 to 7 working days, you will get approval. That does not mean that you are fully registered yet. It just means that you can then gain access to all of the application documents which come from the system, tweak them to fit your business model, have them signed off, submit them, and then within another 5 working days, you will get your business license. At the moment, we are processing an incorporation in Ningbo, where it has taken over 15 working days, and we still don't have the online application approved. So it really does depend on the location, and again, that city application process. The key thing is that once you do have your business license, everything relatively moves relatively swiftly. Obviously, if you're a consulting company, the establishment will be much, much faster than if you're a trading company, because you would need to apply for more licenses. The same with a manufacturing company. There you would need to apply for even more licenses. So consulting company is quickest, trading company thereafter, manufacturing company thereafter that. Bank account openings are really unpredictable. The key thing you need to remember is that whoever is designated as the legal representative will need to provide their original passport to the bank of their choice to open up the bank account. During COVID, and actually it's become a routine, nobody really flies over to China now just for the bank account opening. Usually they will just courier their passports over so we can open it. Passports will be needed for the actual bank account opening as well as the online bank account opening. That whole process can take anywhere between 30 and 45 working days. Really comes down to who the shareholder of the company is and the complexity of that, because the bank will do their due diligence process on the shareholder. The more complex it is, the more time they need to do the due diligence process, and hence it might take up to 45, sometimes even 60 days, 2 months to open the account. You can have any contact you want at the bank, but the due diligence process is really critical. Anybody who goes outside of that due diligence process could get fired by the bank, which is why these are really now rigid and stringent times that we are living in. Again, it's really, really important to talk to a local expert about what licenses you need, what are the general procedures. Again, there will be nuances in terms of the procedures depending on the location that you want to set up in. When you register a company, it's not just a registration in China, it's a registration in the city that you are looking to register in, and ultimately then in the district where your office is actually going to be located. You do need to have a registered office address. Another question that popped in is, what types of business entities can foreign companies establish in China? There are a lot of different entity types. So you have representative offices, which are just liaison offices. These are really not common anymore. We have found that they're not really of much use in the long-term scheme of operations in China. 99% of all of our clients set up limited liability companies that are then owned by foreign investors. So ultimately, you're setting up a limited liability company that is owned, let's say, by one shareholder that's a foreign investor, or you can set up a joint venture. Joint ventures in China refer to a mainland Chinese party and a foreign invested party. Now, you can also set up limited liability companies with multiple foreign invested individuals or foreign invested companies. Again, the shareholders agreement in those structures, when you have multiple shareholders, really should be looked at by a lawyer to make sure you've crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's, and it's a bulletproof agreement for everybody. Business entities are really a matter of understanding what's your business model in China, what do you need, creating a tax optimized structure that fits what you need to do. Another question that has popped in is, what are the most common pitfalls foreign companies make when entering the Chinese market? Common pitfalls really are all about underestimating the complexity of the regulatory environment, failing to protect your intellectual property, not considering that processes, procedures are different than where you're from, and that you have to adapt yourself. I think people come to China and assume that they can kind of replicate what they do already now without realizing that it's a completely different model. I think also there is I think companies also don't do market research enough. I don't think that they pivot and are flexible with their structures in order to meet market considerations. And again, all of this is about being current and being able to pivot at a moment's notice. We also have a lot of clients who initially just want to delegate the work, which is all well and good, but even if you delegate the work, you need to still observe, learn, and follow up that the work that is being done is correct and is according to your company philosophy and company ethos. Some people just want to delegate and look at the results, and that's it. It's all well and good, but you can't really grow and scale as you might want to, or at the speed that you might want to, compared if you do it yourself and you've got control over a lot of the decision making. How can a company effectively protect its IP in China? This is relatively easy. You need a IP agent, really, who has the ability to submit applications to register your trademarks, patents, and copyrights. Just for your reference, we only do trademarks because really you need to go to an expert in patent registrations because those applications are very technical and very extensive. Copyright's the same, in order to be able to submit those. Please make sure you put that on your priority list. There have been a lot of companies that have been blocked from accessing the Chinese market because either they've had IP hijackers steal, if you will, or register their brand assets ahead of time, and therefore have to think about rebranding or thinking another way of how to get into the market. Those are all the questions that have popped in. I want to thank you all for joining me. And again, if you've got any questions, you can reach out to me, Christina@woodburnglobal.com. You can also fill out our contact inquiry form on our website. Happy to have a phone call with you to see how we can help you achieve success in the Chinese market. Thank you all for joining. Take care and goodbye.